Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. Super excited for today's episode. Joining me all the way from South Africa is Kevin Cahill. I'm going to throw it over to you, Kevin, to go ahead and give yourself an introduction.
Thanks, Dave, and I appreciate you having me on. I watched a few episodes and I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
But just an introduction to myself. So, my name is Kevin, as you said, and I'm in South Africa. But to be honest, my location varies quite a bit month to month. So, I suppose I'm what you call a digital nomad at the moment. I've kind of been traveling for the past 8, 9 months. But I obviously work as I go, so you can see this is like my office for like the next month or two. And what I work on generally is helping people with their finances, money management, and investing. So I did that for a career, or I was working in wealth management in a Swiss investment bank for 5, 6 years. And when I stepped away from that, mostly for a bit more work-life balance, I kind of started helping people with that myself. And yeah, it's
In-
been going well.
yeah, interesting. And so you're originally from the United Kingdom, correct?
Ireland, actually. So
Ireland.
not correct.
Okay.
Close, close.
Sorry.
Not the same. Yeah,
Not
but
at
no,
all.
so
Not at all.
I lived in London for like the past 5, 6 years. So my accent probably isn't as strong as your
Yeah,
typical
you
Irishman.
definitely do not have that thick Irish accent, that North Americans, associate with Ireland.
Yeah, no, it's definitely faded a little bit. Like if I'm back home, it usually kicks in a bit more, but
Right,
I'm
yeah.
probably yeah, I'm probably more understandable to a lot of people, so nowadays, so it's better.
Yeah, good stuff. So, wealth management, I guess, that's obviously right up the alley here of, the Passive Income Podcast and the audience here, the viewers and the listeners. And so I guess, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that and, the decision. Obviously, that work-life balance is, incredibly important to have as well. So, yeah, just dive a little deeper into your background there in that career and what made you step away.
Yeah, so basically I went into the Swiss investment bank like straight out of university. I did like an internship during uni and then did the graduate program at this bank, and basically because I came straight out of uni and like I'm big on the traveling and stuff, so I didn't get to do probably as much of it as I would have liked.
Y-
I think just working in that corporate office environment for the bulk of 5, 6 years, I just kind of wanted to change the scenery. But it's not even that I didn't enjoy the work. Like I really like got along with my team. Most of the time that I was in the bank, it was spent in the same team. Um, so I didn't really have any major complaints. I think it was more just like a lifestyle change that I was looking for.
Right.
And when I kind of realized that like, you don't necessarily have to stay in that 9 to 5 environment. You can kind of step out and do your own thing. I said like, let me at least give it a try. And yeah, it's been going well since. Obviously, the work life balance isn't as it is leveled out a little bit because I'm in the office at the moment, but on a regular week, it's more of a 2 or 3 hours a day rather than like 9 to 5.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned
Mm.
the term digital nomad, which I've heard more and more, recently. And I guess just sort of speak to that and that term, digital nomad.
Yeah, I don't even know where that came from really, but I think it's becoming such a big thing now. Like COVID, for all the bad that it did, it actually is kind of a good thing that came out of that. I think
Right.
like you do see, like obviously it made a lot of people realize that like you don't necessarily even have to work in the office in your standard job. There is a lot of people who are just working from home now still.
Right.
And like I've traveled previously, but I never like and I would have seen, in the likes of Bali and Thailand and stuff, like there's big digital nomad communities. So I would have seen like a lot of people kind of do just working on their daily lives and kind of living the life that I was looking for, but I didn't never really understood like how it was possible sort of thing.
Right.
Um, but now that I've kind of stepped into it and like I think entrepreneurial you are seeing like a lot more like entrepreneurs nowadays anyway, especially with like younger people. They don't necessarily go into your typical jobs straight away nowadays. I think a lot
Yeah,
of people want
definitely.
to just do their own thing. Um, One thing I'd say is with the digital nomad stuff, like it does look super glamorous sometimes, but like when you're like in the countryside of like some random country, like I just came from Zimbabwe as well, like Wi-Fi and even just like the basics of like electricity is harder to come by than you think.
Right.
So when you're working like with majoritively with UK clients over Zoom, like it can get a bit painful at times.
Interesting. So let's
Are
talk.
you?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just ask. You're based in Canada. Whereabouts?
Yeah, correct. I'm in Canada. I'm in Ontario. I'm roughly a 2-hour drive east of Toronto, so just on the north, obviously the north side of Lake Ontario.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, because my sister has actually moved to Vancouver only last year, so she's like working in like marketing over there now. She's loving it.
Yeah, Vancouver is beautiful. I love Vancouver. It's one of the most beautiful. I say it's by far the most beautiful city in Canada, and then one of the most beautiful places in the world. And don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, I know there's lots of other, very beautiful scenery out there in the world as well. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about Vancouver.
yeah, it's on my list to be fair.
Nice. Yeah, you'll love it there.
Mm.
So let's talk about investing, maybe a little bit of your own personal investing strategies,
Mm-hmm.
and we can also get into talking about what you help your clients with as well. But obviously, you must have sort of your own personal path that you're on, and so what does that journey look like, or what has it looked like so far? And
Mm. Yeah, so it's a good question to be fair. Like, and just to touch on that point about my clients and myself, like a lot of what I do personally is what I help my clients with. So like even like the likes of like my budgeting strategies, investment tracking stuff, like all of that is generally I help my clients with as well.
right,
But of course, like not everyone is the same. Everyone has different risk tolerances and things. So generally I'll open up like or talk all my clients through like a whole range of options when they start getting into the investing side of things, and we just kind of work out between them what makes sense for them or what they're thinking long term. And if they have goals or specific investment goals, or whether it be property or whatever else, then obviously we tailor their portfolios more towards that.
right,
Um, Myself, like to be honest, it could take me a while because my portfolio is like a lot more diverse than probably your average person. I don't necessarily just like invest in one asset type or even within an asset type, one specific thing.
right,
So just a quick overview, like at the moment, I have quite a large allocation of like index funds. Um, That'd be like kind of my one of my bases. I also invest quite heavily into gold coins, which I can tell you a bit more about.
sure,
Um, Peer-to-peer lending is quite uh, a large chunk of my portfolio at the moment as well. So, to be honest, that actually is a good example of a passive income. Um, Not something I necessarily recommend to everyone, just because I know people have gone wrong with that before, but I've been doing it for like several years now with like specific partnerships, and it's gone really well for me. Dividend producing bonds. So I do have a small allocation of those at the moment. Um, and then I have some more, even more alternative stuff. So I bought a horse last year with my dad. That was kind of more like a passion investment. So like my family comes from like a background of like horse breeders and trainers.
Okay.
So I just think like a lot of the time, if you're doing something different, then you should with your investments, then you should have some familiarity or knowledge that other people don't have. And basically just the fact that my family are well able to like pick horses from young and like will like it's kind of like a hedge. It's almost as like a reselling sort of thing once they appreciate in value. And like when you buy them really young, they're almost certain if so long as you pick the right sort of characteristics, they're almost certain to increase in value up to the age that they start training.
Right.
Right. So that's an alternative one that you probably don't see much. um, there's a few more things, but do you have any questions about any of that?
Yeah, well, so what you first started, talking about there was, you know, about your clients. It sounded like a little bit of a practice what you preach, approach. It was like, "Okay, I'm gonna tell you sort of this," and then obviously, like you said, taking different people's different risk tolerances. But that was kind of my first thought there was, okay, practice what you preach is kind of the way you go about your own, investing strategy. And then, yeah,
Mhm.
horses. Let's talk about horses because that's a very interesting topic. And I'm very curious. So, like thoroughbreds for horse racing or
So basically, like the intended long-term purpose is horse racing, but because like horse racing is extremely like competitive and you have a very like if you were buying a horse at a very young age, like there's a very slim chance that they'll go on and like win a big enough race so that you would profit from like the race like winnings.
right?
So that's like too high risk, and that's kind of like a really really rich man's game,
Yeah,
like.
well, and it's such a small time frame window because thoroughbreds like they're 3 year olds that race in like like the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown here in North America, and we obviously have
Mhm.
some big horse races in Canada as well. But 3 year olds, and then so that window is basically 3 years, right? Like not a very long time frame at all.
Yeah, exactly. So the way that it works with the sort of horses that my family is involved with, basically, they generally will start like proper training at the age of 2.5, 3.
Right,
So they generally get brought to market initially for for investors or enthusiasts to purchase around coming up to the first year.
yeah, yearlings,
So yeah, exactly. So you can tell a lot about like the way that the horse is walking and just the way that it looks at that point, so long as you're like obviously familiar and you've done it before. So like I myself honestly wouldn't have much of an idea, but it's my uncles that have the expertise in that area, so they kind of did the picking and choosing there. And they have had some really big winners over the years actually, so they've done quite well from just that alone. But basically for as an investment, my intended like investment strategy on that is we've purchased one anyway for now. That horse is staying with my uncle and like being raised with my uncle because he's got like the facilities and everything for that.
right,
Um and then in a year or 2 years time, depending on how she's looking, we then bring her back to the market and essentially try and sell her to someone else whose intended purpose is to race them. Um, a lot of what, like, to be honest, there's not much variables at that point. So long as they don't get injured or anything, you're generally okay. They'll generally like increase in value, same as anything else would.
hmm
Um, but a lot of what's influenced is like the family. So for example, luckily, since I've actually bought this one, she's had two sisters that have already started racing and won races. So essentially, like yesterday's price is not today's price, you know.
Right. So are these quarter
Uh,
horses or
so mine is a filly, but they're I think, to be honest, you may have different terms over there.
okay.
But yeah, so she was just a foal at the time, and I'd have to look up her papers to be honest, because I haven't even been home to see her yet.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Um, yeah, but yeah, you seem to know a bit about horse racing yourself.
Yeah, so I in one of my previous lives, I had a little hobby farm and I had a couple horses with my ex-wife and yeah, we were going to a lot of different types of horse shows and county fairs and all sorts
Okay,
of
cool.
different events like that. And
Hmm,
so, yeah, I kind of understand the idea of horses as an investment, but yeah, they can be, sort of a risky investment because also, hay costs money, vet bills cost money, grain costs money. Like, there's a
definitely.
lot of things that go into taking care of a horse, and also just the work and the time, right? It's definitely not passive income if you're the one who's out there, mucking out the stalls
It's
and
true.
doing everything that needs to be done to take care of them. So
That's a very good point, to be fair. And like, this is one thing that I actually tell people is that like, well, firstly, it's not something that I really deal with my clients. Um,
yeah,
because it's not your average investment. It's more of a personal hobby almost. But
yeah,
because obviously I'm not around much, so like technically for me it almost is a passive investment because it is my uncle who does like the management and all the rearing, and he has other horses as well. So like naturally that you're right, like that stuff is costly. But if you were to pay someone like him to do that for you and you weren't like family, it would be a lot more costly as well, like I'm lucky that I
exactly.
management costs are I'm getting family rates at least.
Interesting.
Um,
So moving on from horses, because I could probably talk about that for an extremely long time, as you've probably figured out.
yeah.
um, yeah, just curious. Like you said, you're very diversified. Um, almost sounds like you're questioning yourself if you're over diversified, which can be a thing, right?
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a fair point to be honest. Like to be honest, I'm not actually questioning myself on that front, but um like I'm very comfortable with my portfolio, but I just know that like with a lot of investors, like although they'll diversify, they may not necessarily diversify to the degree that I do.
Right.
Um but I rarely see like diversity as a negative thing unless it's a case where you're maybe not even building up any sort of amount of anything, and you only kind of have like fragments of things. Um, and at the same time, like I do tell people, like especially like you do get some people that and some clients that just want to keep it as simple as possible. They want to make sure that they're going with a fairly safe strategy, but um they don't want to be looking after too many hens sort of thing. So a lot of the time I'll even tell people like that, like within an index fund you probably get enough diversity for most people anyway.
Right.
um but yeah, to be honest, I just think especially with the way things are at the moment, I mean the US, obviously they only just increased their debt ceiling like yesterday, I think it was. um just a few things that like I've obviously with the likes of COVID and everything, like I think it's just good to have a couple of different hedged bets essentially nowadays, just in case something that we haven't really experienced yet is to occur.
Yeah, that's a great point about diversification and, um, having like you said, taking care of too many hens. I feel I'm kind of there at that point where it's like, wow, I have a lot of different individual stocks in my portfolio now, and sure, I keep adding to some here and there, but there's others that I'd like to add to, but you know, it's not like you can just put boatloads of money into all of them all at once. It's sort of, you've got a dollar cost average in and take your
Yeah,
time and sort of, that every 2 weeks when the paycheck arrives, pay yourself first and sort of
exactly.
all of those wonderful terms of pay yourself first and dollar cost averaging. And you're right. It's like, are you not really building up anything in one individual stock because you have just too many spread across your portfolio. And trust me, I'm right exactly at that point where I'm going, what do I do? Do I just trim some and pull them down, or do I just sort of leave them because almost all of mine but one are dividend paying, and a lot of them are monthly dividends. So it's like, well,
Mm.
you know what, I can just leave them too and let that, whether it's even might only be a $5 or $8 dividend, but it's coming in every month. So just I'm not gonna say no to
Yeah.
$5 every month, right?
Yeah, and I think like that's a great point as well. But I think sometimes like there's not necessarily like a right or wrong answer there, even though because there's always the standpoint that if you were to invest more so into one particular stock or two particular stocks, you never know, like something could happen to that company and you'd regret that then.
Right,
So I think one thing that you kind of just touched on there, like without even mentioning, is just the fact that like we are looking at investments over a long period of time. Like it's easy to get bogged down with, oh, I'm not accumulating this particular one as fast as I'd like, but there's going to be plenty more opportunities and plenty more time to do that as well.
yeah, exactly. Speaking of diversification, let's just jump into some of the different sectors. Like, what would you say the biggest sector is in your portfolio?
At the moment, like it's probably technically property, but that's without me even that's just the sector. I don't even physically own any property at the moment. Um, but that's what I would consider like my peer-to-peer loans as.
Right.
So, are you familiar with the concept of peer-to-peer loan?
I'm not overly familiar, to be honest. If you want to explain it more, that I'm sure our listeners and viewers would appreciate that.
Sure. So, like, basically, it's essentially just a loan between two entities. So, you know how the bank obviously gives people loans for large percentage rates, and then um, they pretty much filter that money or they filter that interest back out to you, but in a much smaller amount of interest. And then you keep your money in the bank, which they then use and loan out.
Right.
So that's essentially how the bank works. The peer-to-peer loan is just kind of removes the bank from that process. So you directly, like if you're the lender, you directly loan your money to whoever is the borrower, and which is in this case, and most of the time is like property investors or developers or someone along those lines, because they'll obviously be raising finance for their own investments. So then whether there's two types, you can either do it through a platform or like direct personal relationships. I've tried both, and I usually do the direct to personal relationships because I can agree my own terms. So like between myself and the borrower, we agree a set period of time for the loan, a set interest rate, and set amounts of whatever I'm comfortable with, basically. So right now, the reason that I have probably the most allocation of that is because, or I have quite a lot of money in loans, is because over just the last year or two, like stocks and things like that, crypto, it's all been struggling a little bit. And this is just like a way that I like earn steady set percentages from my money. So it is passive income. I sign a contract, send over the funds, and then I get paid out either quarterly or at the end of the term. And obviously, then the full principal amount is repaid to me as well.
Right.
Um, Generally, it varies in terms of amounts, whatever you agree, and how much you're actually loaning. But usually, you end up getting somewhere between 10 to 12% over 6 months, which is quite good.
Yeah, that's a very good return.
Yeah, and like it like to a lot of people, like the concept's genuinely it's a little bit intimidating because you're sending money to someone, and that's why I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone, especially because I know people who've tried to go out and do it on their own and they've ended up doing it with someone who's just not reliable and it's gone badly.
Right.
But like I'm lucky enough that I've actually developed these relationships from like when these people kind of started their journeys, and like they're like successful um property developers now who are like almost have a pretty big personal brand to like uphold. So, and I've also had like multiple loans fully returned to me, and I've never had like a capital loss. So it's kind of hard to argue with that as well.
Yeah, no, you're doing well because I definitely see the risk there of what happens if they don't repay the loan, right? Like, that's a pretty big risk,
Exactly.
but it sounds like I don't know if I wanna use the word lucky. Obviously, you must be probably doing the research to know that these people are reputable and that they will repay the loan.
Yeah, so that's obviously a big element of it, and like like there might have been an element of luck, I think, to begin with when I was like starting out with these people because I wouldn't have necessarily had that relationship, but and now it's not, I don't even really have any fear because also to be fair, um all of these people like own multiple properties themselves, and in the contracts, like at least one of their properties is set as collateral. So if they don't pay me like the amount that I'm owed, it's immediately due from their own property.
Right,
And also there's also terms agreed in case of like late payments. So like one thing that I like about the loans is that it's hands off, so you don't have to do anything, but you also are actually like building up your money, and it's increasing in value and then can be used for something else at some point. So like if I get it returned to me in 6 month intervals, if anything changes, I know I can use that for something else and it'll at least have been growing in the meantime.
yeah, interesting.
But yeah, they also, as I was saying, like I generally stipulate that if there's a late payment made at any point, then like the interest rate per month increases for every month that I don't receive my money. So I'm almost like if there's a late payment, it's almost a good thing.
Kind of a good thing, but also kind of a nervous thing too, because 'cause you're wondering, like, "Where's my money?"
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it hasn't happened to me yet, but I'm sure if it did, I would be a little bit anxious, as
Right.
with any investment, really.
And then you mentioned another way is a platform, so I'm assuming you just mean like like an internet-based platform that sets this up for people? And have you done that
Yeah,
route as well?
I have done, yeah. So with lesser amounts, to be honest, it's a bit slower, but it's kind of like the peer-to-peer platform just is like an intermediary between the lenders and the borrowers, but it kind of works more on like a crowdfunding sort of basis. So, for example, like let's say you put £1,000 or dollars into your account, you can just set it so that like you choose kind of the types of projects that you like, and then your funds in very small amounts, like usually like 10 to $50, gets loaned out to various different projects as they come up.
Right,
So um basically if one of those projects goes badly, you may lose that 10 to £50, but generally the money gets returned to you from interest from the other projects essentially. And also, like the platform that I use again has had like a 0% capital loss, so quite good.
yep,
But there's also the option, like if you were particularly knowledgeable about property and this sort of thing, you can just like self-select different projects that you choose. Um, I again, it's something that like I don't necessarily recommend to everyone, but it's actually quite a good option. Like I think my average yearly return on those is more like 8% per year.
Which is still good,
So
right?
it's still good, yeah, exactly. I mean, if you consider that, like for like the S&P 500, for example, I think it's like 8 to 10% per year on average, but
Yeah, generally.
that's not every year, you know. Um, but yeah,
So so you say it's like crowdfunding, so that makes me think, okay, you put in $1,000 or 1,000 quid, and then 100 other people put in 1,000, and then some developer or property manager comes along and says, "Okay, I need 100 grand," and that's they pool all of those contributions together. Is that am I kinda getting it? Well, you're nodding
that's
yes, so I must be kinda getting it right.
that's exactly it, to be honest. So like the platform that I use, um, generally, if there's a good project that comes up, and it's like the good thing about it is that like I've seen a lot of these platforms, and again, just a little warning to anyone who might be listening that like you really need to do your due diligence on this sort of thing, because there are platforms out there, and I know people that have used them that they're just a bit unreliable, and like for example, a red flag would be like if there's hundreds of not fully funded projects, it probably means that the company themselves isn't doing a huge amount of like due diligence on these borrowers, you know?
Right,
Whereas the one that I use, there's kind of like 2 to 3 projects maybe a week. And it's usually borrowers that they've worked with or have gone through the platform before. Um, so that's quite good. And like also I think it has quite a like large like investor base. So generally, like you mentioned, like 100 grand and everyone's putting in 1,000. Generally, it's more like it can be any amount being raised, but it's more like 20 to 50 pounds from everyone. And like I've seen like £1 million, £2 million projects be funded in like 20 minutes kind of thing. So it's at least people are like utilizing the platform, which is a good sign.
so you're talking more like 10 or 50,000 people then all contributing 20 or $50 or pounds or whichever currency.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So then the interest amounts that and your capital as it comes back to you, it comes back to you in like small little increments. So you can kind of see like there's a chart of like, okay, this is all the money in your account. This amount is in active loans. This amount is due in 3 months. This amount is due in 6 months. You know, it's quite cool.
Yeah, sounds very interesting, and it sounds like you don't need a lot of capital, that you don't need 1,000, you can start with, like you said, 20 or 50 or $100 or something.
Sorry, you actually cut out for a second there. I didn't quite catch that one.
Oh, I'm sorry, it sounded like you can start with, like, a less lower amount than you don't need 1,000, you can start with 20 or 50, 100,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. So that's like for anyone that's like kind of interested in it when I'm talking people through it, like if you're doing the direct loans, like property investors, they're not interested in £50 for the most part. Like
Right,
usually the minimum for like the direct loans is like 5 to 10K. And then all depending on the developer as well. But the platform then you can kind of get started from like £50. And it is a passive income route. It's a bit slower, but it's still quite consistent if you're talking like 7 to 8% per year,
right. We haven't talked at all about sort of any individual stocks that you own or companies like, in that realm. Let's dive into that.
So so on that front, to be honest, the reason we probably haven't that hasn't even come up is because like I don't do very much investing in individual stocks. And I was going to touch on this with the point that you made about like diversification, because like my portfolio is quite diversified amongst different types of assets. So like you were saying, you manage quite a lot of the individual stocks. So like I find that if I was to do that as well, there would just be a bit too much. I think, in
Right.
terms of me having to manage too many pieces. Um, Especially because I work with, like, my clients and things as well, so, like, it would just be a bit too much all over the place for me personally right now. I do I do always kinda have an eye on that, and if there's anything that particularly piques my interest, then I will have little stakes here and there of things, but I I generally do stick to, like, index funds for the most part when it comes to stock market investing. But I'm definitely one thing, is that, like, I'm quite interested in, like, getting more knowledgeable about, like, dividend investing and things because I don't do a huge amount of it myself, so I would kinda like to hear a little bit about, like, maybe some of the stuff that you hold or your favorite stocks.
Yeah, so, my most favorite part of the dividend investing strategy is, those dividends that come in every month or every quarter, and cash flow to then buy more of the shares so that the next month or next quarter, you're getting more dividends. It's like I referred to it before as the exact opposite of a vicious circle. It's like the happy circle, right? But
I
to
like
answer
that,
your
yeah.
question, what I'm invested in, so everything I hold is in the Canadian market on the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange. Um,
Yeah,
since the beginning of this year, I've been dollar cost averaging into primarily Bell Canada, which is our number one telecom, and well, they're now a media provider as well. They started out
okay.
well over 100 years ago as like telephone landlines, but I'm sure like everywhere else in the world, they've developed into cell phones and uh, media uh, conglomerate as well. So Bell Canada, I've
Mhm,
been DCAing into since the beginning of this year. Bank of Nova Scotia is one of the big five Canadian banks that same since the start of the year. Um, Hydro One is our electricity provider in Ontario. So I've been, trying to same since the beginning of this year. Those are the three that I've been focused on primarily this year.
mhm,
Last year, I bought a lot of REITs, real estate investment trusts, and here in
yeah,
Canada, these are the ones that I'm referring to as the monthly dividend payers. Every
okay.
REIT that I hold pays a monthly dividend, so it's just really nice that on the 16th. They get paid out on the 15th of every month, and so they settle into my brokerage account on the 16th. So it's like the 16th of every month is my favorite day of the month because it's just like there's there's more money in my account.
Yeah, of course. And but you said you're reinvesting always with the dividends or
Yeah, so it's nice because I don't have actually my platform just recently introduced DRIP, dividend reinvestment plan, like automatic DRIP.
okay, nice.
I I personally prefer manual reinvesting, so I can say, okay, well, I got this money from this company, but I want to maybe buy some more shares of this other company this month, right? So, yeah,
Mm.
every 2 weeks on payday, it's pay myself first, put transfer some money into my brokerage account, and use that little extra capital plus the dividends to buy more shares.
Yeah, okay. No, because I think that's where, like, some people go wrong when they're not 100% sure, and they don't. So, like, I've come across some clients where they've been investing in a dividend stock, maybe even without realizing, and then the dividend just ends up sitting in cash in their brokerage,
Right.
and obviously, like, that's the beauty of compound interest. Really, is that you have to reinvest at least some or most of the dividends in order to benefit from the increase over time, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
Um,
why for those clients, that's why drip was perfect. They can just, every quarter when that dividend arrives, it just automatically buys more shares. So then the next quarter, it's a bigger payment that buys more shares. A happy circle.
yeah, yeah, it's true, and that's something that, like, I recommend to people who, like, maybe are new to investing or they're hesitant about the complications of investing and things like that. Like, nowadays, you can really simplify it if you want to. It can be as hands off as you want. As you said, you can just set it up so that it does kind of the work itself.
Right.
Um, and that's something that puts people off because I know they if you look at investing as a whole topic, to someone who hasn't even started or looked into it, like, it's intimidating. So I
Intimidating and
just
overwhelming.
yeah, exactly. You don't, and I can understand not knowing where to start. And I suppose that's why I have clients, because this sort of stuff is something that people do need help with. It's not exactly covered very well in like our school system anyway. I'm not too
Yeah,
sure
not
about
here either.
yeah. Funny, that's one thing that's probably across the globe is consistent, that school systems are not covering financial health very well.
Not at all, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking to your, point about, like, the hands-off investing approach, and this is where I'm gonna circle back to you, being those index funds and ETFs, another great example of, you know, within those index funds and ETFs, you have money managers that are doing the work, and you don't have to think about it nearly as much, so it is a lot more hands-off. You do kinda have to watch what fees you might be paying, but other than that, it's it's a set it and forget it type of, investment strategy, not financial advice.
Yeah, no, definitely not financial advice, but that is the gist of it though at the same time, like I think that's a good point. And like what I tell to some people who really have no idea about investing, they might not have even heard of an index fund, is that like, you know, for them, the idea of going and picking individual stocks is just it's too much. So I just asked them like if they could invest in the top 500 stocks in the US or in the UK or wherever else, like would that
Yeah,
be of interest to them? And they don't even realize that, it's as simple as that. You can literally go and put it into that as if it's a savings account every other month.
interesting. I'm gonna pull up your, link tree here on the screen, and we'll
Okay.
just, have a quick chat. You have a lot here on your link tree,
hmm
and,
some bits might need a little updating, to be fair.
okay, fair enough. So, I will link this link tree in the description below.
That'd be
So
good.
if you're interested in contacting Kevin for anything, right here, first one, book a free strategy call. So that's definitely helpful for anyone who would like to become a client.
hmm
Free financial
yes.
free financial freedom starter pack and the financial freedom Bible. So those seemed like kind of all uh, client based.
Yeah, so just to quickly explain that, um, like the free call, I generally recommend to people who either have like some savings stashed up already and they're kind of looking to invest, or anyone really. I mean, I'll help you if I can, regardless of where you're at in your financial journey. But that's usually just 15-30 minutes for me to kind of get to know whether or not this person is a suitable client and how I could potentially help them. And I'll talk them through like my services and things like that. The free financial freedom starter pack. So that basically is just a bundle that I've created over the years that basically is will help anyone improve their finances to a degree. It's not just for people starting out. There's my budget tracker, investment tracker, an ebook just on investing foundations. And when I say investing foundations, I mean the things that I personally think most people should be familiar with or at least have covered before they even kind of start investing. So, like your emergency funds, your budgeting, credit, insurances, just things that you should at least be aware of before you kind of start investing in crypto, for example. Um, and then the Financial Freedom Bible. So that's my Patreon. It's a subscription membership basically where I've been uploading articles and podcasts and resources and trackers and things like that over the past year now. Generally like once or twice a week. It's generally it's most of like my advice but condensed into podcasts and articles. But the thing there is obviously, you interpret that in your own sort of way. You have to apply it yourself. Like there's not really much one-to-one assistance from me, even though I do include a free like monthly call as well. Um, but also what I tell people if they are signing up for it, like it's really detailed. Like I've gone into so much detail in every article as much as possible, but at the same time, like it's blanket recommendations and details of like what I personally do or what I personally recommend. So take, you have to take everything with a pinch of salt and apply it to your own situation, essentially.
Yeah, wow, sounds like quite the deep dive in the Financial Freedom Bible. Then further down the link tree, your gold coins, Savvy Wallet, peer to peer. So that's more information there about the peer to peer loans. Uh,
Yep, so that's a different podcast.
Another gold coins podcast, the Dropout Diaries number 13. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's just another podcast that I was on. Like that's just a group of lads that I know from Ireland who are they both dropped out of university to do like high ticket sales basically. So
Okay.
they often like essentially the concept is they get like successful entrepreneurs or other people that are kind of doing their own stuff outside of university for the most part, and just kind of talk to them about their journeys and how they can help people, things like that. It's quite good actually. I recommend you check it out. I'm actually the exception because I didn't drop out, but they liked to have me on anyway, so that was good.
And then Talk Cash or Don't Speak, another podcast. Further down
Mhm.
the link tree, start earning five-figure months, reduce your
So that
expenses easily. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that first one, like that's my basically. So she helps people to like start freelancing with like web development and things like that for anyone that's interested.
Cool. Reduce your expenses. Yeah, just spend less money. It sounds so easy, right?
Yeah, it's true. But that's in particular referring to this company that I have a partnership with in the UK. They combine all your bills into one. So you can get all your electricity, heating, Wi-Fi, phone contract all into one bill. And because it's all through the one provider, then they're able to like beat everyone's like rates and stuff. So it's just a way for people to save a bit of money, really.
Oh, interesting. And then several links for crypto. Protect
Mhm.
your crypto. Join Coinbase. Quidco. American Express credit card. So that's for points. Free trades. Cheap international money transfers. 500 quid for no fee.
So to be honest, all of those first last five or six that you've kind of mentioned, those are just things for the most part that I use, and the option is there if you want to sign up for them as well. You can, and you generally receive some sort of free gift or bonus or anything like that.
Right. And then just two partnerships here at the bottom of the link tree. Mindset
Mm.
Matters Magazine and Brand Blueprint.
Yeah, so Brand Blueprint, that's my girlfriend's company as mentioned, and the Mindset Matters, that's just a charity initiative that I've worked with as well.
Awesome. Interesting. So as I mentioned, I will put the link in the description below for Kevin's link tree. And you can find Kevin on Twitter as well at Cahill underscore Kev.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate that. And for anyone listening as well, or for anyone that I actually direct to this after this releases, make sure you check out the rest of Dave's podcast because there's loads of good information on there too.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, already 50 minutes. These conversations are so amazing because at the start, your people are always say to me, I didn't know we were going to talk for like an hour. And I'm like, yeah, just you start talking and you have a great conversation. And all of a sudden, 45, 50, 55, 60 minutes have gone by and you're just like, wow.
Yeah, any podcast I've been on, it's always the same, So long as it's two people that are able to hold a conversation, time just flies by, to be honest.
Yeah. So
But it
with
was a
that
good
said,
discussion.
sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, it was a good discussion. I enjoyed it. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, exactly. With that said, thank you so much for your time and coming on and being a guest here on the Passive Income Podcast. Before we sign off, any final thoughts?
Um, yeah, I suppose just to circle back a little bit to that point about for people that are, maybe a bit hesitant about investing or a bit unsure about investing, especially those that have a lot of money sitting in the bank that's just wasting away with inflation.
Yeah,
Just make just make sure that you're doing something nowadays, or at least investing in your knowledge and trying to learn about investing so you can see, maybe what's for you. There is something for everyone, that's for sure. No matter your risk profile or your knowledge base, you'll definitely be able to find something. And if you're based in the UK, Ireland, or the US, feel free to drop me a message and I'll help you get started. And we'll even have one of those free calls.
what about Canadians? Can we call?
So hopefully soon, but to be honest, there's like differences between the UK and Irish financial systems and the Canadian financial system. Same with the US, to be honest, but I'm only just kind of gotten through a lot, like learning a lot of that myself so that I
Right.
can offer it to US clients. But I think, you know what? Yeah, definitely reach out anyway, because there's the standard personal finance stuff that I'll be able to help anyone with.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and yeah, hopefully someday I'll upgrade my knowledge enough to be able to take on more Canadian clients.
Awesome. I Great conversation. Thank you so much for being here. If you're still watching or listening, well over 50 minutes later, please be sure to subscribe.